Hi there, and Happy New Year. Jan from Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, the Loft Warehouse, here with another market update at the top of 2023. The hot take on this market update is that buyers want stability in the market, both of interest rates and of home values. And as we will see, they are going to get it. And why prices aren't going to come down anytime soon, and why we are nowhere near any sort of market crash with any of the normal indicators. So let's first start with mortgage rates and how they are affecting purchasing. The market is always looking for certainty and not volatility like we had in the last 6 to 8 months. The Fed met in December and raised their rate 0.5% or 50 basis points. Their next meeting is scheduled for January 31st. And market experts say that the Fed has indicated that rates are going to stay where they are in 2023. They're not likely to go down any significant amount until 2024. And that's a good thing. We want that stability. So mortgage rates seem to have peaked at the beginning of November when they were in the high sevens. They have since come down to the mid sixes, and the projections for the rest of 2023 is that they are going to stay in the mid sixes. Now, you might think that this is a bad thing because it's rates higher than we've been used to for a long time over the past many years, but it's not. It brings predictability back in the market, and buyers like predictability. It allows them to plan. So I think what we're going to see is more buyers coming back in the market because they know rates aren't going up in any significant way, and they kind of are getting used to the fact that they're not coming down in any significant way, so people can actually plan to become homeowners again. So, so one interesting facet that I'm seeing now when we're talking about mortgage rates is the 10-year treasury yield versus the 30-year mortgage. And I think this is really interesting. So let's look at this slide. This is showing the average, the history of the 10-year treasury yield versus the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate. So they travel together. They're always never too far apart from each other. And the average amount that these two rates differ is about 1.7. So what's interesting is that the current spread is 2.9, meaning that the 30-year mortgage is 2.9 higher than the 10-year treasury. So that's a significant difference from the average. It means that lenders are making a lot of money on rates right now. So let's look at this next slide. So this basically kind of brings that into perspective. It basically shows you that if the 30-year mortgage was only 1.7 higher than the 10-year treasury, like it normally is, rates should be closer to 5.5%. So the question is, why are they in the mid sixes when history shows us we should be in the mid fives? So I asked some smart people, and basically the answer is that the mortgage investors, people who set the rates because they buy mortgages and hold them, they set the rates where they are. And the reason for that is because they know that as soon as rates come down, that buyers, the first thing they're going to do is refinance out of those mid six mortgages. And so knowing that, these investors are setting a higher rate right now because they want to make their money on the front end. They want to charge a premium on the front end because they know they will not be holding those mortgages for very long. Now, that doesn't make much sense to me. You would think that competition in the market among these different lenders would bring rates down to compete with each other for business, and we may still see that. But for right now, just know that there is a big difference in the 10-year treasury and the 30-year fixed mortgage rate because apparently investors want to make money on the front end. So that is the hot take on mortgages for now. We're going to talk about home prices and inventory in the local market next. Now let's talk about home values in our local market and buyer demand. So buyer demand is down. The amount of transactions is down and is predicted to be a lot lower than it has been the past couple years. However, home values are remaining fairly stable. So let's dig into why. So home sales are down and there is always seasonality in every market. So what you're going to see in the next slides that I show you is a significant up and down every year as values go up and down and home sales go up and down and new listings go up and down, and that's very normal. We're going to compare to where we were the same time of year in 2019 so we can get a really good comparison on January to January, January of 2019 to January of 2023. So home sales are down. We had 30,000 homes on the market in our MLS in 2019, January 2019, versus 17,000 today. And so some of it's the market and some of it's seasonality. There are always fewer homes to sell in the winter, but we have far less inventory on the market than we had in 2019. New listings are also way down. So owners of current homes do not want to sell unless they absolutely have to, because they probably have a 2, 3, 4% interest rate and they don't want to give that up, especially if it means buying another home with a much higher interest rate. So that is really preventing a lot of homeowners from wanting to make a move right now and putting a new home on the market. So at the beginning, January 2019, we had 11,000 new listings coming on the market. Compare that to 6,000 new listings today. And you can see that seasonality, but if you compare January to January, we're about 5,000 fewer homes coming on the market than we did 4 years ago to January. So let's talk about the median home value. So median home value, and this does change with the season as well. You can actually buy houses for much cheaper in the winter than you can in the summer. Just keep that in mind if you're ever in the market. So the median home value at the beginning of 2019 was, for the entire MLS, median home value $158,000. Compare that to $215,000 today. So the average and median home values have gone up significantly since 2019. Now, if you remember back from Econ 101, when demand goes down, which we are seeing in the market today, way fewer buyers because of interest rates, supply normally goes up and then prices come down because of that. But because of those last slides that I've shown you and the reason that we just don't have enough houses on the market, we don't have enough houses in general, and we don't have enough houses coming to the market. In this market, it's sort of defying the normal economics. When demand went down, supply also went down, and that has kept prices stable. That has kept prices sort of where they were. We're not seeing any significant changes in market values outside of the normal seasonality that we're going to see. So no reason to fear that we're going to see any type of crash. I'm going to get into that in the next segment as well, but prices are going to remain stable as long as buyer demand stays down and the amount of inventory we have continues to go down. So stay tuned for details on recession. So keeping in mind the information that I've given you related to interest rates and home values versus inventory, we know where we are now. Of course, we can use those as predictors to dictate where we may be going for the rest of the year. And yes, some people would say that we are either in a recession or heading towards a recession. But I'd like to remind you that recession usually does not equal housing crisis. It only equaled housing crisis one time, which is the time that everybody remembers, the Great Recession. But normally a recession does not equal any sort of crash of real estate values. And I'm going to show you some things, the biggest markers that would help you see why we are nowhere near anything like that. The biggest downward pressure that we had on home values in 2008 was a massive amount of foreclosures. So banks, when they own property, they don't like to keep property on their books. The first thing that they want to do is sell it, and they just kept lowering prices until people would actually buy, which sort of lowered values for real estate in general and tanked the entire real estate market. So I'm going to show you why we're not going to have an increase in foreclosures. So let's start with debt to income. Debt to income is a record low. So this is basically the percentage of your mortgage compared to your monthly income. We are at record lows. That means people are borrowing way less than they need to. You can see where we were during the Great Recession. People were up to their gills in debt. So we are nowhere near to borrowing the same amount of debt that we had back then. Lending standards are still very high. So this graph tracks how easy or hard it is to get a mortgage over time. And a lot of the things that we put into place to not allow the Great Recession to happen again are still in place, all of that Dodd-Frank stuff. And as you can see, it is very hard to get a mortgage right now, which means that the people who are getting them can actually afford to pay them and make it a priority to pay them, which just reduces the amount of overall foreclosures. Let's look at home equity. You might see this in the headlines now that home equity has dropped. But put that into context, it is still at a record high. So this basically means that if someone is in financial distress, they are more likely to be able to sell their home because they actually have equity in it than they would have to foreclose. They would be required to foreclose because they couldn't sell it. So this is in a good position. If somebody finds themselves in financial distress, the ability for them to sell and actually pay off all of their debts is very high. That's also going to keep the amount of foreclosures low. Yes, all of this contributes to the fact that foreclosures are very low right now. And yes, some of it is the past history from the past few years. Foreclosures were artificially low because we had a moratorium on them, and a lot of those are ending now. So we are going to see foreclosures increase compared to where they were within the past 2 years. And you'll hear those headlines again. Foreclosures have doubled, foreclosures have tripled. Yeah, we're still fewer foreclosures than we had even in 2019. So once we get back up to 2019 levels, that will be sort of average. But right now we have even fewer foreclosures than, so not enough to really make a difference in home values. When a foreclosure does get listed in the market, it gets listed for market rate because we don't have enough inventory, as we just discussed. So it's going to sell for market rate, keeping the status quo among values. So those were all of the contributors to the Great Recession and the real estate market crash. We are not seeing any of those indicators today. So no need to worry about it. We're not exactly sure what the next year is going to look like, but we have a pretty good idea based on the things that we've already discussed. So thanks so much for watching. If you get value out of these videos every month, I would love to hear your feedback, and feel free to share them with others. And I'll make another video for you next month. Thanks again.